Hi everyone, my name is Brooklyn Burkhart and today I'll be talking about differentiated instruction. So differentiated instruction is based on the individual's needs, so that your teacher needs to find out or you as a teacher need to find out what level each student is at, and you need to tailor your instruction to meet the needs of each specific child based on their needs. So how teachers can differentiate instruction, there's 4 steps to it. The first one being content. So you should design your activities that cover various levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So those levels are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So students who are unfamiliar with the lesson would complete activities on the lower levels, which are remembering and understanding, and students who are close to mastering the skill would complete activities that are on the higher levels, such as evaluating and creating. So an example of each would be for the students who are more unfamiliar, they could do an assignment such as matching vocab words to definitions, and then students who are close to mastering could create a PowerPoint presentation that would summarize the lesson. The next step of that is process. So all students learn in different ways, and some students need one-on-one instruction, others they can work independently. So there also are students who could benefit from working with a partner or with a group, and teachers can improve students' learning by finding out the ways that students learn best, whether that be one-on-one or group instruction. So an example would be that you should provide your visual learners with textbooks or graphics or videos that help them visually see what they're supposed to be learning about, and then allow your auditory learners to hear you explain a lesson. They could also watch a video or see the video so that they could hear and know how to do their lesson a lot better. The third one is product. So the product is what the student gets out of the lesson, and that shows that they have mastered the lesson. And there's different ways to show mastery, like tests, projects, or reports. And you should allow your students to show their mastery. They get to pick one that shows that best relates to their learning style. So a student who is a really good kinesthetic learner should be able to build their project and show that they've learned through building and using their hands, and that helps them show their mastery a lot better that way. Next is the learning environment, and that's more of like the layout of your classroom, and that really comes to play to provide optimal learning for your students. So there should be also, I think, different types of seating in your classroom. I've seen a lot of the bouncy balls and other types of seating in classrooms that help students be able to move in their seats without having to get up and distract the whole classroom. Also group work, so tables with multiple seats that allow students to do group work, and then also individual desks, so the students who like to work by themselves can do that. Some examples would be to create the flexible seating, so students can choose their seats for what works best for their learning style. And then you can also have the pods so that students can do the group work if that's how they learn best. So to prepare your students in your classroom for differentiated learning, you really need to make sure that your classroom is super organized and make sure that there's a place for everything. So one of those spots is your floor space. So each seating arrangement should have its own place. Your teacher's desk should be in one place, your center should be in an area of your classroom, or small group work areas, and your student's desk should also be in a different place. You don't want everything all in one area because that can confuse the students. Materials and like storage are also a big part of it. Your students need to know where everything's at and be able to access it without disrupting the whole classroom. Such as like your turn-in bin for your assignments when they're finished. That should be an easy access place. And then also places where there are extra school supplies and stuff that students need to get on their own. Another thing is bulletin boards and wall space. So your bulletin board should have information that students can gain something from. You don't want just random things up on the walls, and they should also have areas of your walls that are blank and very minimal for the students who can be overstimulated. That's a good place for them to be able to sit so that they can learn well in those areas. Some ways to incorporate differentiated learning into the classroom. are that teachers could design lessons based on the students' learning styles. So if you have visual learners, lots of visual learners, you could do one lesson that's visual learning based. And then if you have some kinesthetic learners, you could do a project and have them do hands-on things so that they can learn the best that way. Also, teachers could group students who have similar interests. So if a lot of students are interested in one part of a science part, then they could all be grouped there and they could do that assignment together. Also, you could group them by their abilities. So your lower kids are most likely going to be working together a lot because they'll probably be pulled out of the classroom in little small groups and stuff. And that's a good way to differentiate your learning. Another way is by the learning styles. You could group them by their learning style so that they could do assignments that help them learn the material the best. And then another way is to incorporate technology into the classroom. So there are apps that if students are succeeding in really understanding the problems that they're doing, it will just move them on and they will get the harder lessons. And then students who need more help, the teacher can also come over and instruct them individually, or the program will also know that they are kind of falling behind and will give them more practice. So some common classroom practices that aren't really the best for differentiated learning. One would be that a teacher delivers instruction by primarily lecturing. And this really is an example of differentiated instruction because not all students learn well from lectures, and all students learn in different ways. So by only lecturing, your teacher is really not giving their all to their students because your students who are hands-on learners, they need things to be able to touch and feel and know what they're learning. So a way to change this would be that the teachers could begin to find different ways to give their instruction that could meet their students' needs, which, like I said, you could do some hands-on learning so that your students who are kinesthetic learners can get the most out of that assignment. So some examples would be for visualization, bring in materials to help teach a lesson. For learners who learn really well by seeing things, you could use technology and show videos and allow students to use different learning apps. And then you could also use inquiry-based instruction to allow your students to ask questions during the lesson and spark a conversation that can really help to learn the topic that you are talking about that day. Another common classroom practice that's not great for differentiated learning would be that a teacher groups students at the beginning of the year based on the previous year's achievement test scores. I don't believe this is an example of differentiated instruction because students may continue to grow over the summer. Also, some students don't learn well with achievement tests. They don't do well on the achievement tests, and those won't show how well they actually know things. So instead of doing that, teachers should perform different tests at the beginning of the year that show different learning styles to find the new level of their students' learning. I know that some teachers do, or most teachers do running records, so they will do them at the end of the year, but then when you come back to school, they will run them right again at the beginning of the year, and you can find out where your students are at in that lesson, or that part of the school year. So some examples would be run tests to figure out where your students' learning styles are so that they can learn best with their style of learning, and you can group them that way instead of by their achievement test scores. And then also to perform the new running records to see where your students are at the beginning of the year, and you should run those throughout your year so that you can tell your students are always improving, or if they're falling back behind, that you can give them the extra help they need. And then one last common classroom practice is that does not follow differentiated instruction would be that teachers give bonus points for classroom participation. And you may think that this sounds like a good idea and, oh yeah, your students are participating, so they should get points for that. Well, not exactly, because a lot of students don't strive in classroom participation, and they would much rather go and do their own individualized work, but they would still get the same result and they would still be working really hard just by themselves. So teachers should allow points for other things, such as the following the directions or completing your assignments in whichever way that suits them best, because everyone has a different learning style and we can't expect every student to participate in the same way. So group work is good for some students, but other students, they won't succeed that way. And so giving points for that kind of defeats those kids because it makes them think, well, I'm not going to do that, so then they don't get the points for that. So there should be points in other parts that all students are able to achieve. So some examples would be allow the students to choose if they want to do group work or work by themselves, and then also give them a choice that will help them feel like they have some control, and that will make them to feel like they can do this assignment and they can work really hard. And then here are my sources about differentiated instruction. Thank you.